Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight video and it's on one of my favorite artisanal houses, the house of Dmitry Bortnikoff, and this one's called Oud Cologne. Now, as you guys know, I love talking about these artisanal fragrances on the channel, mostly because that's what interests me. So that's kind of where my nose has been going lately, vintage and artisanal. The new designers, even the new high-end designers, I would say, have been letdowns for me, although I would love to smell the new Frederic Malle. Actually, the last couple Frederic Malle releases I haven't smelled yet. So there's still some niche stuff that interests me, but I saw an article today that said L'Oreal is considering investing in Amouage, which, as if the nail in the Amouage coffin wasn't dead enough already, now L'Oreal's thinking about stepping in. It's like, oh my God. Just throw the dirt on them now and walk away. So, a lot of what has happened in the niche to some of my favorite old houses like Creed and Amouage has been really disheartening. So vintage and artisanal for me. And I went on an absolute Bortnikoff binge a couple months back, reviewed everything from them that I had. I had a lot of full bottles that I had been avoiding reviewing, and I reviewed a lot of them, but there's a few that obviously you can't smell everything. It's impossible. But there's a few samples that I've been sitting on for a while. And I have tested this one 3 times so far. So Oud Cologne came out in 2021, and it is of their Cologne line, which is basically a little bit cheaper from the main line. So if you watched my reviews on things like Oud Maximus or Oud Monarch or Lao Oud or Chypre du Nord, those are all $350 for 50 mils, okay? The Cologne line, which includes my favorite, which I've said publicly a lot, out of all the colognes I've smelled, Amber Cologne is my favorite by far. I think this is one of the most classy sort of ambergris colognes out there in the artisanal space. I love Amber Cologne. I love wearing it on special occasions, Father's Day, birthday, stuff like that. It works perfect for that. And so the Cologne line is $250, so it's $100 cheaper. You still get the 50 mils of juice, but because it's a cologne, it's actually either an eau de parfum or an extrait de parfum, depending on the fragrance. So Amber Cologne's an eau de parfum. Oud Cologne's actually an extrait. Even though it's a cologne, it's listed as an extrait. So it came out in 2021, and the notes are bergamot, white grapefruit, bitter orange, juniper berries, and pink pepper, with a heart of pine needles, geranium, rose, and nutmeg, with a base of white ambergris, benzoin from Siam, wild oud from Thailand, tonka bean, and vetiver, okay? So if you paid attention to that note listing and instantly thought there's a fougere twist to this, you would be right. So here's what they say. Oud Cologne opens with a burst of citruses, bergamot, white grapefruit, and bitter orange. The zesty aroma of their peel is prolonged by the freshness of juniper berries, pink pepper, and ginger. In the heart of the composition, you will delve into the green accord, made up of pine needles, geranium, rose, and nutmeg. The base of the fragrance that lingers for hours consists of white ambergris, benzoin from Siam, wild oud from Thailand, tonka bean, and vetiver. Oud Cologne is a fresh, long-lasting, and very easy-to-wear Oriental fougere. Interesting sort of wording there. I probably would call this type of fragrance an amber fougere with an oud twist. That's the way I would describe this fragrance after really getting to know it, but they call it an Oriental fougere. Maybe just different ways of saying something similar, which will naturally bring a little bit of joy to your life, just like a walk into a green forest. Okay, so that's a little blurb on the Bortnikoff website. It is still available for purchase. And so for me, this cologne starts off with a very realistic, the first minute or two, beautiful realistic citruses. I get tangerine. Even though they say bitter orange, I get a very distinct peppery tangerine, like a black pepper, like a peppery tangerine. Even though they say pink pepper, which usually adds this fiery aspect to it, I get this black peppery, like tangerine note. And it very quickly evolves into this sort of bitter orange / grapefruit, okay? And so slowly it transitions to this grapefruit, which is very crisp and bitter, and hints of this fizzy purple smelling sort of juniper berry, if you will. And the juniper berry adds a little bit of that pizzazz, that fizz. Juniper berry is used to Sprighten up gin, if you will. And so you get a little bit of this fizzy smelling juniper berries. And if you've ever smelled Aquilaria Blossom by Aries Ledore, there is a yuzu note in there that really reminds me of the opening. Like there's maybe a little bit of yuzu, maybe a little bit of that fresh oud style citrus kind of cologne. Now they go in completely different directions, but if you've smelled Ocularia Blossom, or some of the other cologne lines from Bortnikoff, you'll kind of get in the ballpark. It's not groundbreaking in the opening. There's nothing that's gonna make you say, wow, I've never smelled that before, but it is very, very nice and very well done. Okay, very clean. If you like the way Taha from Agar Aura does fresh ouds, this is one that I think you should sniff. The sort of clean, palate, fruity, floral type ouds. This falls into that category. And as the fragrance dries, you do get touches of green notes. Now, I think they overemphasize the green notes, me personally, because they ended the write-up with just like a walk in the forest. And I think that overemphasizes the touch of pine needle that you get in here. I don't think it's as overwhelming as they almost make it seem, but the pine needles make an appearance, and also the green spicy side of geranium makes an appearance here. The geranium note actually gets really nice in the mid. Maybe, you know, I know Bortnikoff is sort of well known for doing florals that are off the beaten path, and I always rave about his use of Blue Lotus and Magnolia and Frangipani and all this stuff, but this geranium note is very, very well done. And so very rarely does he get a compliment from me. I think I'm just doing some of the basic florals, but this is kind of one of those back to basic fragrances, and I think he did very well here. So, and interestingly enough, geranium can sometimes have a little bit of a rosy touch to it. They say there's rose in here, but I don't really get a proper rose note. I almost get just a geranium that sometimes smells a little bit rosy. And as usual, the florals start to shine in the mid, but it's not the off the beaten path florals. It's rose and geranium, so nothing crazy here. Like I said, this is a very fundamental up and down fragrance. And in the heart, and it takes a while. The citrus top, which has that ginger adds that palate cleansing, you know, it's used to prolong the citrusy opening into the heart. And I must admit, the first time, or maybe even two, that I tested this, I was lukewarm on this scent. Lukewarm to not impressed. Let's put it that way. And I think the reason is in 2022, I did a live stream called A Very Bortnikoff Christmas, or a very Bortnikoff holiday, or something like that, where I tested 3 of his new colognes. And the reason I tested them in Christmas time was because that's when they were released. It was a very strange release date. But the 3 of them were colognes that had like different color labels. So Bortnikoff's labels all, for the most part, kind of look like this, with this gold plate on the front. These colognes had like a purple plate, an orange plate, these different colors basically. And so one of them was like Cologne de la Terre, and it had a green plate, for example. And I really hated those. All 3 of them I thought were I thought they were the worst Bortnikoffs I've ever smelled. And many of them used these citrusy notes in a way that I didn't like. They used things like blood orange. He tried to use that, let's say, a Kubima note that Roja uses to kind of bring the citruses into the heart, and the base notes more make it seem like the citruses are lasting longer. And I thought they smelled cheap. They smelled like cleaner. I thought they were some of the worst Bortnikoffs I've ever smelled. And I think he got obsessed with using this kind of orange note in a couple of those. And I think the first couple of times that I tried this, this almost felt to me like a precursor of what was to come in 2022. So when I smelled this and I was thinking, my God, this is 2021, I could already start to see his obsession with some of the citruses here. And it just got worse. And I feel like, I almost felt like I was like watching a preamble to what was to come. And I didn't like it. And the other thing is, they call it an Oriental Fougere in their write-up. And I was thinking, I don't smell any ambers. I don't smell any vanillas. I don't smell labdanums. I don't smell resins. Where's the Oriental part? And so I think what had to happen for me is my expectation of the scent and what was being said weren't meshing up. And then also I had this issue with his future releases, which the opening of this reminded me a little bit of. But all that being said, once I was able to get past the whole citrus opening that kind of reminded me of some of the colognes, which I did not like later on, and I also was able to kind of merge my idea of what I would call an amber fougere. So, for example, if you know a fougere composition, basically just the basic fougere composition is lavender, geranium, tonka bean, or coumarin, or something along those lines, right? And usually maybe some oak moss or something like that. And so this basic fougere composition with some sort of what I would call amber fougere aspect. So for example, if you've ever smelled things like Zino, Zino is a great example of an amber fougere. If you've ever smelled Free Life by Aigner, Free Life is a great example of an amber fougere. If you've ever smelled Heritage by Guerlain, this is an amber fougere. And one of my favorite categories, actually. And so once I was able to kind of mesh the two and kind of realize what this was, I began to enjoy it more. So the first couple times I was very lukewarm on it, almost to the fact where I was going to say, and this is maybe one of the weaker cologne offerings, because on this channel I reviewed, for example, on this channel I reviewed Moss Cologne, which I thought was an amazing, almost like a Chypre take, like a green Chypre, and huge slug of oak moss. Go check out my review. I really like Moss Cologne. So for me, it would be Amber Cologne, Moss Cologne, and then I reviewed a couple of the other colognes as well, I think, but this would have been at the bottom. And it may still be at the bottom, but I don't think of it as badly as I do the first couple times I've worn it, because I think in my mind I've been able to kind of wrap my head around what Bortnikoff has been able to do, and or what he was trying to do, and I'm enjoying it more, okay? So basically what ends up happening is, by the way, there's no lavender in here. I have to mention that. That's an important aspect. If you caught the note listing, you'll realize that there's no lavender. So technically, you know, there are like the skeleton of a fougere, but bits and pieces missing, right? He didn't want to make it too apparent for whatever reason. But what ends up happening is the more I tested it, the more I started to pick up on little things that I like. Like, for example, there is this musky undertone to the fragrance. So the opening that I mentioned, that bitter sort of citrusy, tangerine, grapefruit, that's slightly peppery, as it evolves into the heart, and the pine needles start to come out, which they're not as prominent as they make it seem, by the way, but there are little touches of green pine needles here and there, almost like you're walking in a forest and there's pine needles scattered, right? You're not smelling them. They're not the main thing that you're smelling. This is not polo green by any stretch of the imagination, but you're picking it up as you see it. And when you look at the pine needles, you're maybe a little more aware of the greenery around you. That's kind of how the green aspect of Oud Cologne works for me. And the other thing is, this musky undertone kept kind of making me come back and wanting to try it again and again. And that musky undertone, the only thing I can think of is that it's the white ambergris, because apparently there is real white ambergris in here. And, you know, white ambergris is like the highest quality. So you have black at the low end, the most animalic, brown and in the middle, and then white at the top. And white is the most musky, ethereal, cloudy. You know, sometimes white ambergris can have this musky, cloudy property to it, right? And the more I wore the fragrance, and I got, like I said, I got a chance to test it 3 times, the more that the traditional fougere aspects began to appear, right? So I think just I had this block as I was wearing this the first couple times. It's one of the reasons why first impressions are so hard. I don't think first impressions are useless per se, but I do think that first impressions are very hard to get useful information, because sometimes you do a first impression and it's not like you're lying, you're just saying your honest feelings right then and there, but you test it again and again, and you start to, either your opinion evolves or changes, or, you know, maybe even goes in a different direction. A lot of times first impressions are going to be how you feel about the scent, but you know, I've seen a lot of situations where your brain just isn't able to process everything at once, all at once like that. You may pick up on bits and pieces here, but you'll miss some of the details of the scent, let's say. And I think that's what was happening with me with this scent for the very first time that I tried it. The second time kind of unlocked a little bit more. And then the third time I started to really kind of wrap my head around it. And, you know, missing that Thai oud since it's not a proper, or missing the lavender since it's not a proper fougere, there is the addition of Thai oud. And it's interesting, maybe Dimitri thought that he didn't want to get as close to the traditional fougere aspect, as you know, he didn't want it to be just that apparent that this is a traditional fougere with an oud note. He wanted it to kind of have some recognizable elements, because the more that I wear it, the more I pick up these gentlemanly, buttoned up traditional fougere elements that I think a fougere lover would like in this. Very classy, very easy to wear, kind of summer scent. And but like I said, it took me a while to get past that citrusy top and the recognition of what was to come in this cologne line, which I absolutely despise. Definitely, hands down, my most hated Bortnikoffs were the colognes released at the end of 2022. It was almost like I had PTSD. Like I had cologne PTSD from smelling those fragrances. They were that bad. Go watch my live stream if you want to get my first impressions on them. I have revisited those and I hate them just as much now. But the more I wore this one, the more it kind of opened up to me, and I really started to enjoy that peppery pink pepper. And pink pepper has this sort of rosy, very likable. You know, it kind of softens the opening a little bit. It makes it a little softer, smoother, easier to accept some of the notes hitting your nose right out of the gate. That's why pink pepper is such a popular note in the opening of fragrances. And the more I kind of like that peppery, beautiful citrus opening with, they say bitter orange, I get a straight up tangerine note in the opening with that grapefruit and bergamot, and it is beautiful with the fizzy juniper, the palate cleansing ginger, all that good stuff. And then it dries, and it's almost like you get pine needles. Like imagine this image, pine needles and rose petals and geranium, like floating on the top of the ocean. But it's not the water. There's no aquatic element to this. It's the ambergris. It's the musky, ethereal, cloudy aspect of ambergris. Ambergris can sometimes have this 3D effect, this holographic effect is how I described it when I reviewed my La Via del Profumo fragrance, which was called Pheromone Pour Homme. Horrible name. Great ambergris fragrance though. If you want to study ambergris, that's a fantastic fragrance. And I think you can get a 16 ml bottle for like 75 bucks. Go check out my review from a couple days ago if you're interested in learning more about that. But I called the ambergris in that scent a holographic ambergris. And this is a very similar feeling, but it's almost like it's a muskier take, because I think as ambergris sits in the sea and floats, right, and it picks up all of the brine, all of the sort of sunlight shining on the ocean, it picks up all of that and soaks it up, because ambergris has that note, that ambrine in it that just keeps everything in and like locks it in like a Ziploc bag. It just locks all of the ingredients that it soaks up in. That's why ambergris from the Irish coast smells different from ambergris washed up on Australia, smells different from ambergris washed up on Oman, right? And all these different scent profiles it can have, and how long has it been in there, and all this stuff. And when it turns white, it really gets to that musky, ethereal stage, and that's exactly where this one is at. And you know, the other thing is that this combination of the musky ambergris with the fougere, I really started to appreciate. And you have to remember, when you're talking about a fougere, fougere literally means fern-like, or like a fern, you know. And if you've ever smelled a fern, you know that ferns have no smell. So this was like a almost like a artistic experiment by Houbigant in the 1880s, I believe it was, with Fougere Royale, to create a fragrance that smelled like a fern, but a fern has no smell. So they kind of had this blank slate as to how they almost wanted to remake what a fern would smell like, right? Man having control over his domain and creating this sort of fern-like scent. but it's become so ubiquitous in perfumery that the more that I smelled this, the more I got that fougere DNA that will remind you of something classy and elegant and easy to wear for the summer. And I mean, this is like one I feel like you could just spray away. You could spray away. It would be different. It would be alluring. It would be captivating to some people around you. It would be easy to wear in the heat. The last thing I'll say is that Thai oud. Many people focus on that Thai oud. The Thai oud here, it's almost like an umbrella that just kind of hovers over everything, and you can see the shadow from the Thai oud, but you can't really feel the oud outright. It's almost like, there are some fougères where I talk about you can feel the presence of the lavender, but you can't smell it, right? Sometimes lavender leaves its imprint on a scent, and you can sense it, but it's not like you can go, oh, I just got the lavender. It kind of leaves its imprint. And that's how the oud in oud cologne works. And it's interesting that the Thai oud replaced the lavender in this scent. So the more I wore it, the more I picked up on things that at least made my perfume nerd brain go, that's interesting. I like that, But it took me a while to get past that opening. And I really think I had like this PTSD block because of what I smelled in 2022. Those colognes he released then were terrible. And I was like, man, this really feels like it's starting to go in that direction, but it's so much better than those colognes. So much better. I really hope he just discontinues them and just forgets about that stage altogether. It looks like they're still available. I also think they are a little bit cheaper, if I'm not mistaken. So Cologne de la Terre. Yeah, Cologne de Feu is one of them with the bitter orange, blood orange, tangerine, lemon, petit. Oh, I hated that one. And there's a peach sorbet note, and oh god, it was awful. But that's $230, so $20 less than this. I thought some of them were maybe even a little bit cheaper, and they smelled cheaper to me. I really didn't like them. I can't say that enough. But I was worried when I first smelled this that this was starting to go in that direction, but I think the more I've worn oud cologne, the more I've come to the realization that I like it. I still don't think I like it more than musk cologne, and I definitely don't like it more than my favorite, like I said, amber cologne. Go watch my review on amber cologne. I think this is one of my go-to summer sort of artisanal fragrances when I want to be season specific. Sometimes I'll wear oud zen or something just in the summer, and I just don't give a shit. But when I want to be season specific, amber cologne's still my favorite. Musk cologne I'd probably rate just below that, but this gets a thumbs up from me. Definitely worth a try, oud cologne. And whoever sent me this sample, one of my perfume god people sent this to me a while ago, and I've been sitting on it. Thank you very much. I love making these kind of videos. There will be more artisanal content on the channel. By the way, my scent of the day was this little bad boy, Luciano Pavarotti. My god, man, what a fragrance. I was listening to his singing of Nessun Dorma today, actually, because I was wearing the scent. I was like, let me listen to this. It's been a while. Man, just the passion, and I mean, even not understanding what the words are, you're just like, wow, that is just, I mean, it's moving. Luciano Pavarotti is probably one of the best celebrity scents I've ever smelled. So yes, I'll review that one of these days. Always working on reviews, but sometimes they take time. But as always, thank you very much for the support, everybody. Thanks for always watching and commenting and liking and subscribing and all this stuff. I mean, we're coming up on, I think, 8,000 subscribers, if I'm not mistaken. So very excited about that. So we will see if I can have the energy to do a blowout bash when we hit 8,000. But as always, it's a pleasure. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.